Good news, my friends. The secret is out. What secret? The secret to BYU's success in 2024 and something they absolutely need to have a rebound season this year. We'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, your resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you who are everydayers with us right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Of course, the motto is your team every day, and as such, this is your original daily podcast focused on all things BYU. Appreciate all of you guys checking us out. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan. Are you the kind of driver that likes to push things just a little bit further? Ever wonder what adventure could be right around the next corner, my friends? Take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, or the Nissan Armada and go find your next big adventure. Check them out all today at nissanusa.com. All right, let's talk BYU football. Now, I promised in the open, we're going to talk about the secret to success for BYU in 2024. Well, what is it, Jake? Give me the heads up on this. Well, new Los Angeles Chargers head coach Jim Harbaugh, who obviously just recently left the Michigan Wolverines after leading Michigan to a national championship, he revealed what I firmly believe is the secret to success in all things football, and it's something that Jim Harbaugh has absolutely relied upon throughout his coaching career as a head coach. And he said this earlier this week, quote, "The offensive line to me is important. If I ask you the question, what position group depends on no other position group to be good, but every other position group depends on them to be good, what position group is that? Offensive line." He adds this, "They're not relying on any other position group to be good. They go out, yet every other position group relies on the offensive line to be good." He's not wrong about this, folks. The offensive line is absolutely critical. By the way, it also affects the defense. Think about this. When an offensive line is controlling the line of scrimmage and dominating an opposing defensive line, offenses stay on the field routinely for 10 plus plays. And by the end of it, the defense is absolutely exhausted and you may have carved off 7, 8, 9 minutes on the game clock. It is absolutely imperative that BYU and any team, really, if they want to have success, has above average, if not downright stellar offensive line play. That leads me to this. BYU has hopes of getting back to being the dominant offensive line they showed in 2020, 2021, 2022. 2023, things fell off, and they fell off in a big way. Connor Pay has been on this podcast routinely, and he's acknowledged that. He said it fell off, and we've got to get back to doing what we do on this offensive line. Well, what did they do to improve that? They brought in a new offensive line coach in TJ Woods, and in having conversations with people who are involved with the program, I like to call them our practice insiders, but in talking with people around the program, they are ecstatic that TJ Woods is in place with BYU's offensive line group. They believe he is the technician, the overall teacher that will get BYU's offensive linemen back to the level that they were when Jeff Grimes and Eric Mateos and Ryan Pugh were working things for BYU along that offensive front. Remember, Jeff Grimes, so many people opine for those days when he was at BYU because the offensive lines were so good. BYU benefited even after he left because he had coached up so many guys and they were in a position to succeed. Things fell off the last 2 years, and you can blame that on what you will. Was it Darryl Funk's failures? Maybe in part. Was there discord amongst the offensive line room? Well, I think we've heard Connor Pay allude to that. There were some issues with the group overall on that offensive line. But one thing that Aaron Roderick has been adamant about in his media his media conversations is what I should say, this spring. He said, we're getting back. We want to be back to running the football. We want to be the team, the offensive line in particular, that we can be. Jim Harbaugh nailed it on the head, folks. The offensive line doesn't rely on anybody else to have success out there. There are 5 guys who go out there, and as I often say, they toil in anonymity, but their success yields success for the entire rest of the offense. If the offensive line is successful, holes are opening for the running backs to run wild. If the offensive line is successful, the quarterback doesn't have guys in his face. He's able to deliver passes to his tight ends or wide receivers or his running backs in the passing game. The offensive line is absolutely critical to any success BYU should and could hope to have this fall. I believe that BYU's on the right track. Do they have the right horses along that offensive line? That remains to be determined, because I have talked about it on this podcast, and trust me, you can go find it on a number of other outlets, is that the rumors are, and I can say this, is that BYU plans to pick up at least one, maybe two more offensive linemen when the transfer portal period opens up next month. Now, next month is like a couple of days away, and I think it technically opens up on April 15th. So expect to hear a name or two along the offensive front added to the mix for BYU. The thing about it is I believe they have a very, very nice core of guys to build around. And the guys I'm talking about obviously are led by Connor Pay. Connor is going into what will be his 5th year in the BYU program, and he is expected to hold down that center spot and be that upperclassman leader that BYU relies upon. Once Braden Keim is back from having surgery on his hands, on both of them, he will be a guy that I expect to play either left or right tackle, and he'll be a stalwart there. And then the other guy that I believe is going to be a rock for BYU that doesn't get mentioned all that often is Waylon Lapuaho. Waylon was solid, if not spectacular, last year for BYU along that offensive front, playing both left and right guard. All throughout spring, he has been a mainstay at that left guard spot for BYU, and I expect that's where he will plug and play this year for the Cougars. So you've got 3 guys, I think, that are absolute bedrock type guys to build around. Now, if the hype of what I'm hearing and what I've talked about Caleb Etienne is real, well, guess what? Then you have 2 bookend tackles that very much look and could operate the part of being 2 skyscrapers to protect if it's Jake Retzloff or Gary Bohannon under center for BYU. The nice part is there are pieces in this BYU program already there that, given time with development, I believe will yield better offensive line play as BYU moves forward here on into the future. And I'm talking about guys like a Peter Falanico, Sonny Makassini, Trevin Osler. I believe Jake Griffin's got a bright future, notwithstanding that play they got blown up by Ephraim Asiata on earlier on this spring. I was thinking guys like Weston Jones, just given the adequate time and the development that I believe TJ Woods will bring to the mix, the offensive line is going to return to being a strength for BYU. I believe they've recruited talent at that position. Now they've got to develop it. You've got to bring the best out of those guys, and that's going to be TJ Woods' prerogative as BYU's offensive line coach and also run game coordinator, is to get the most out of BYU's offensive unit. So I think the nice part is that Jim Harbaugh is absolutely correct in saying that the offensive line is imperative to any and all success a football team has. And BYU has pieces along that offensive front. Now, can they go find 1 or 2 guys that are quote unquote plug and play? You bring them in, they're going to slot right in and start right away and be a part of this program and lead BYU back to glory. If you want to do the roadmap of how BYU gets back to the postseason this year, finds a way to get to 6 wins and even beyond that potentially, it's going to be starting up front. The hog mollies in the front is my former offensive line coach, the great Eli Herring. Yes, I played for Eli, the man who once upon a time turned down the NFL because he wouldn't play on the Sabbath. Eli liked to call his offensive linemen hog mollies. He said, you guys are going to lead us to success. You know what? I think every offensive line coach in the entire country, I don't care what level they're coaching at, would tell you that. And Jim Harbaugh said the secret part out loud, but he's not wrong. He's actually 115% correct that the offensive line for BYU and any other program out there, if they want to have success, you got to get back to having dominant offensive line play. And I believe BYU is on the right track, but it will take some time. And I believe some transfer portal additions to get the right mix of guys and the right overall right level of play the BYU needs this fall. All right, coming up here in just a minute, we're going to flip over. It's time for your guys' time to shine. Our Locked On Cougars Insider Group, I asked for questions for our mailbag edition of the podcast. We're going to dive right into that, and we'll do that coming up momentarily right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Manscaped. They are the spring cleaning champions, my friends. This season, make sure you groom your carpets and the drapes with the leaders in below-the-waist grooming. Clear out all the winter bush with the Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0 and watch your confidence bloom like springtime flowers. Embrace the season and join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our special offer. Go to manscaped.com. Use the promo code LOCKEDON for 20% off. It's as simple as that. Also, free shipping as well. The best part about the Manscaped, it includes an ability to groom anywhere on your body. not just downstairs. You can do it everywhere, my friends. It's because it comes with a compact case. You take it everywhere you go, and you don't have to be left without it wherever you might be this spring. It doesn't just apply to the nether regions either. You can get the full grooming experience with Manscaped's signature Beard Hedger Pro Kit and Handyman Electra Face Shaver as well. As a guy who's got a beard, I'm going to have to check that out myself. So the best part is get 20% off and free shipping with the promo code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com. That's 20% off and free shipping with the promo code LOCKEDON at manscaped.com, my friends. Nothing like a little spring cleaning in your pants. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at Better Together. Now, Better Together, we've talked about this. Any of you who have played daily fantasy sports can realize it can be a little bit of a drag. You're competing against hundreds, if not thousands of other people out there. But the point is about our friends at Better Together. They want you guys to have a fun experience. They want to make it social. They want you guys to have a teammate or a friend that can connect you between the sports you're watching and hopefully get some winnings as well. You pick more or less on real-time player stats, strategize with your partner, boost your odds, and climb the leaderboard together. It's as simple as that, my friends. Grab a friend and join the social DFS movement and have some fun with our friends at Better Together. It provides a sense of camaraderie, enhances the social experience of watching sports, obviously. Make sure you realize that DFS is fun alone, but like a lot of things, it's a lot better with your friends. So download Better Together today from the App Store, and then sign up using the promo code LOCKEDON for a chance to win your share of over $1,000 in cash prizes. Play with me on a contest on today, Friday, or tomorrow on Saturday. It doesn't matter when. Remember the promo code LOCKEDON, because winning alone is fun, but obviously it's better together. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Apologies for that. Are you tired of watching Fox Sports or ESPN and hearing all of the shouting going on, having to turn down your volume? I want to encourage you guys to make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day, bringing the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, it's your time to shine. I threw it out on our Locked On Cougars Insider group. By the way, if you have not joined our Locked On Cougars Insider group, you'd like to ask questions of the podcast, well, I encourage you guys to join us. It's a really, really fun way to interact with the show. It's $5 a month. You get a 14-day free trial to see if it's the right option for you. And literally, you can interact with me via text message. Think about that. It's a really, really fun way to interact with the show, and appreciate all of y'all who have done that. Now, a big question, I've had a few people reach out, and I know that Drake Toll did one over on Locked On Big 12. He talked about the ticket situation at BYU. Now, the biggest thing with the ticket situation, I'm addressing like 4 or 5 different people's questions, and a number of you out there have had seats that you've had for, in some cases, literally decades. I understand the angst amongst Cougar fans about having to reseat the north and south end zones this year. They reseated the east and west stands last year, and it sounds like it'll be a constant shuffle every single year. And hey, it is what it is. And the biggest thing is that when it comes to the reseating process, BYU simply is just going like everybody else out there, and they're giving in to the almighty dollar. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's capitalism, folks. It is what it is. And Drake said a similar statement. I know I watched Locked On Big 12 all the time, and he talked about this. But the biggest thing is, I think Cougar fans, and I'm talking about all y'all, need to understand that BYU is playing at a higher level than they ever have before. They've joined a Power 4 conference. With that affiliation, it involves upgrading facilities. It involves upgrading the overall budgets of all of these athletic programs that BYU boasts in their athletic department. Just an overall investment and a major boost in all of that is what is needed. Well, where does that ultimately land? Yes, part of it is going to come via the TV rights that BYU football is going to be generating as part of their Big 12 media rights still. That's going to be somewhere in the right now $19 million range, if you believe the reports. And then it's going to kick up into the mid-30s. And then by the end of this current deal that BYU has through the early part of next decade, could be somewhere near $50 million annually. That obviously will help boost profits and boost BYU's athletic department. But let's be honest. Where does the buck stop when it comes to sports? It stops with you, the fan. So, yes, BYU is going to ultimately lay more money at the foot of their fans and ask them to pay it. And that's what they've done. I've talked with some people who have literally had seats that they had in the north or south end zones who have moved 40 some odd rows higher than they were previously. And obviously, all this has to do with what level the Cougar Club membership you are, and all of that. I have aspirations. I did this going back 2 or 3 years. I had a pair of tickets, and I sent a number of you who are longtime everydayers here on the podcast to BYU football games throughout that football season. I have hopes that I can pull that off again this year. We're going to see. I've got a slot to pick my tickets in a week's time. I'm not a member of the Cougar Club. It's the podcast. It's not going to do that. We're not allowed to, I guess, technically, but nonetheless, we'll see if I have ticket availability. And if we do, you can guarantee we'll do exactly like we do with the football program, the basketball season, and we'll send you guys to those games. We'll see what happens. But I can understand the angst. And trust me, I got a lot of comments about some saying it's been an awful experience in some circumstances. Other ones saying, hey, I only had to move a row and maybe 3 seats over. And that was by choice. So there's no perfect solution to this. Let's be very, very frank about it. But I believe BYU is trying to do the absolute best they can, and they understand, and I think they probably do a better job themselves in terms of getting the overall messaging out there about the overall investment needed to compete at this level. It requires more money. The way you generate more money, yes, added TV rights benefits will help, but that comes via ticket revenue. That comes via extra donations from major boosters. And yet again, the NIL situation is just completely separate from this, but BYU is going to ask for you to contribute to NIL as the lay fan as well. And there's a lot. It is a lot, especially when a lot of us are facing economic headwinds that we haven't faced in a little while. And so, like I said, there's no perfect solution for this, but here's the deal. BYU is doing as they believe is in their best interest, even if it has turned off some fans. And I actually know of one dear friend of mine who gave up his season tickets. He's just like, yeah, I'm out. And hey, there may be a couple of people who are like that, but by and large, there's going to be a group of people who are pounding on the door wanting to take those tickets and probably already have scooped them up if they are available. So it's a really, really kind of unique situation. I can't really come down to one side or the other. Yes, I get that there are legacy seats that people have had, like I said, literally for decades. But at the same time, times change and times be a changing in Provo. All right. I spent way too much on that, talking about that question, but let's get to some of the other questions here. And let's kind of get through them rapid fire. First question, we'll talk about Nick Chadwick's questions here. Now, Nick had a very good question here. He says that, I apologize. I got to find the actual question from Nick. I opened the wrong tab and it's like, oh, there we go. Have you heard of any additions to the football recruiting staff? Now, I have been crowing about this. I want to see an improvement and overall just upgrade of additions to the football recruiting staff. What I have been told is BYU has aspirations of doing that, but the timeline is TBD. So it sounds like they have plans to do so, but similar to the conversation we just had about tickets, you got to have the money in the program to do that. Now, I would imagine the BYU's got the money if they really want to find it in the athletic department budget, but we'll see what happens. And the other thing about this, it seems like BYU's lacked the player coach who's able to light a fire under the team. Who do you think can fill that role? Yes, it does have this. And please don't say that love and learn is their motto anymore. Now, I have not heard love and learn this spring. I will say that to you, Nick. In terms of a coach, who is that accountability coach? Probably the best way to say it. What I understand is that BYU across the board has been better about overall all the coaches doing that. But one guy I believe that can do that is a guy I already talked about on today's show, TJ Woods. That dude, he's an offensive line coach through and through. And O-line coaches, any of you who know what O-line coaches typically are at, they are surly, mean sons of guns. And TJ, when he wants to be, he can turn on the charm, but just as easily, he can light a fire under who's rear end. And I think I think that's something that BYU needs. So we'll see if it's TJ Woods or if it's just an overall improvement on that side of things. It'll be interesting to see what happens on that front. All right. Other questions here. We are looking at the situation. This comes from Taylor Dallin. He asked this, Jake, can you tell me an update on the Siale Acera situation? Now, Siale Acera is an interesting one because he injured his foot late last season, and I have not seen him during spring camp. Does that mean it's a long-term injury? TBD. But the fact that he's not been out there practicing for BYU this spring leads me to believe that he is still on the shelf. Now, he's not the only one. Marcus McKenzie, I have not seen him participate in drills. And he also had a foot injury because we've seen him on a knee scooter and in a boot walking around. So these are injuries that you're hoping that will be resolved in relatively short order, and we'll see what happens. But I look at it and I say that I would hope that a guy like Ciala Serra is able to be healthy by fall, because that's ultimately when it really matters, is getting him on the field by that point. And I'd love to see if he's capable of doing that. He also asked this: what are your projections for LJ Martin now he's had a full year to grow and develop? Now, that's a great question. I believe that LJ has got the capability to be a major player for this BYU offense. I talked about the offensive line and their success, yielding success for BYU's running backs. Well, if BYU is a better offensive line production, guess what? LJ Martin has shown the ability to really find holes and exploit them in BYU's offense already as a true freshman. The best part is he's bulked up, he's added 20 pounds, and he says he's just as fast, if not faster, than he was before that. That's an incredible combo right there. 220 plus pounds, feeling like he's just as fast as he was as a freshman, and he was a pretty nice home run hitter. Remember that big plays that he had, most notably against Arkansas. I think that his projections are very, very high. I'm looking forward to seeing what he's capable of behind a revamped offensive line unit. I expect will have improvement. Now, I'm also going to give a shout out to Taylor here. Taylor is part of the group down there in Provo that has worked on the new lofts and towns at River's Edge. You may know it better as the old Movies 8 area down there in Provo. They've really done a nice job revamping that. It's got a lot of housing. There's a lot of new restaurants in there. So if you're looking for somewhere to live potentially, hit up Taylor and his crew over there, Lofts and Towns at River's Edge. We'll give him a little bit of a shout out. I know we were talking about what he did for work earlier today. All right, a couple other questions here before we move along. We'll flip over to basketball real quick. Now, this is an interesting one because the basketball situation is the BYU is looking at the transfer portal, obviously trying to find guys. You're starting to see, as I said, every day it feels like there's a guy that pops up from some website that says, this player's been contacted by these teams, and BYU seems to be in the mix on a lot of these. The bigger question that comes is, are you going to see BYU in terms of overall improvement from inside the roster? And Weston asked this. He says, I have been told that Ali Khalifa is planning on having his knee operated on. Is there any idea for when the operation is scheduled for? And that is a great question. I do not know the answer for it, but I am sincerely hoping that procedure happens in the relatively near future and he's able to rehab relatively quickly and get back to 100% health ASAP. Ali Khalifa playing the way he did on a bum knee, and obviously had a pretty bad ankle injury at the tail end of the season that affected him as well. Him being 100% healthy and how effective he was even at not at 100% health, that should excite you. Now, the other question is, are all the coaches returning? I believe so. I've not heard many rumors involving BYU assistants. Now, that obviously could change very quickly, because if a guy all of a sudden decides, hey, I'm better suited to go elsewhere, guess what? They can leave pretty darn quick. And the other thing is, once the transfer portal window closes for college basketball, let's be honest, a lot of assistant coaches make those moves then. They're hanging on, making sure guys are locked in with the program. And then, yeah, by the way, I'm going to this university. It's a dirty game. I'm not saying the BYU's coaches are doing that, but let's be real. It's kind of what happens, it feels like, in this circumstance. It's just kind of the thing you look at and say, okay, are we really going to operate that way? But it's kind of that way, and it's unfortunate. Now, another question on the basketball front comes from Mark. BYU needs an imposing big man for rim protection, inside scoring to be more competitive in the Big 12. Have you heard of anyone in the transfer portal they are looking at? I have not heard names, but I can tell you, Mark, that they are absolutely aware that they need more, as you mentioned, imposing big men on the front line for BYU. Ali Khalifa is 6'11", but he does not scream rim protection. And it's nothing against Ali Khalifa. He is a guy who is suited for offense, and the way he plays is a unique way that BYU absolutely benefits from. But you need to have better rim protection, especially on defense. And as he also pointed out by Mark, you need to have some inside scoring. Well, Foose does his absolute best, but let's face facts. Fousseyni Traore is 6'5". It's just it's not going to work against some of these bigger guys, and we're talking true big guys in the Big 12. I understand that BYU is absolutely intent on trying to find the right guy out there in the transfer portal who can come in and be that rim protector. Will they ultimately find that guy? TBD, but it is absolutely on their wish list for BYU to find a guy of that caliber. We'll see what happens, Mark. I believe you have nailed it. They absolutely want to upgrade that, and we'll see. And then let's see. I think I've got other questions here answered. So apologies if I missed one or two. Oh, there is one from Riker. Now, Riker, you had a great question here. I do not have time to answer this in its entirety because it's a fantastic question. What do you need to see from the offense, defense, and special teams, respectively, this year to consider their season a success in your eyes? that is an entire show worth of content, I feel like, if I really want to dig into that. So I will plan on digging into that in a future episode. I think you've just given me some programming for our off season. It's going to be April next time we reconvene on this podcast. So we'll work that one in, Riker. So apologies, we're going to get to it today, but we'll get to it on tomorrow's show. Now we're going to wrap up today, show us some other notes on BYU teams that are in action this weekend, including a pretty darn good performance from BYU men's golf. I know that golf may turn some of y'all off, but you need to pay attention to what the BYU golf team did earlier this week, and we'll talk about that as you roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Nissan. The March Madness bracket highlight brought to you once again by Nissan. Each week we're picking one team that stands out, one team that seems to be above the rest. And let's start and talk about our friends with the NC State Wolfpack. They're obviously this week's Nissan Rogue. The team has absolutely surprised all of us with their run through the ACC tournament, obviously in their first two games in the tournament. Wins over Texas Tech and Oakland have set them up to play Marquette here in the Sweet 16. Looking forward to seeing how they perform. They say win life, go Rogue, and that's exactly what the Wolfpack have done all season long. I don't know how many people of you noticed this or paid attention to it. In the ACC, there are 6 teams that have an NCAA tournament title and a national championship in their trophy case. The NC State Wolfpack are one of them. They had to beat all 5 of the other teams to make it into the big dance, and they have benefited from that crazy run as they have, as I mentioned, danced their way to the Sweet 16. We'll see how they do in the Sweet 16 against the Marquette Golden Eagles. But hey, I want to encourage you, if you want to take the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, Nissan Armada, and go find your next big adventure, just like our teams here in our March Madness bracket updates, courtesy of your friends at Nissan. You can shop today, NissanUSA.com. Once again, that's the Nissan Rogue, Nissan Pathfinder, and Nissan Armada, all available today at NissanUSA.com. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at Utah Community Credit Union. Of course, UCCU has elevated their checking accounts by enhancing them with more benefits, more savings, and more online protections than ever before. A lot more. Paired with the most advanced and comprehensive mobile banking tools, Elevated Checking is a must-have financial product packed with lifestyle security and financial benefits, including free ATMs nationwide, an exclusive discount on any UCCU auto, RV, or personal loan, an extra 10% cash back on every purchase made with UCCU's Visa Cashback credit card, and UCCU's Credit Score Toolbox, a state-of-the-art set of tools to help you improve your credit score and enhance your financial well-being. Take advantage of all this today, my friends, by getting an elevated checking account. It is free when you do any one of the following. Use your credit or debit card 15 times or more a month, make a monthly direct deposit of $500 or more, or maintain an average daily balance of $1,500. Otherwise, UCCU's elevated checking is just $6 a month. Visit UCCU.com to open an elevated checking account today, or stop by any branch as well in person to open that account as well. It's all courtesy of your friends over at UCCU. Love where you bank. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Appreciate all of you for joining us here on this Friday edition of the podcast. All right, quickly running out of time on today's show. Let's catch up on a couple of quick notes here. But I want to give a major shout out to the BYU men's golf program. Earlier this week, they had an incredible showing, and I actually, I'll be frank, I thought that BYU was playing only in the Goodwin, which they're currently participating in. By the way, as of recording of this podcast, which is Thursday night, they're in 4th place at the Goodwin, which is one of the more premier golf tournaments in the men's golf college calendar. But I had missed that earlier this week, BYU was also in action at the Bridgestone Collegiate Invitational. It was at Napa Valley, California, the Silverado Resort North course. If I'm not mistaken, this is the same course that Johnny Miller, former BYU legend himself, hosted his old PGA Tour stop. But BYU had an incredible showing, winning the team title at this event. And the best part was Cooper Jones, just a freshman for BYU, was the individual champion, leading BYU to a win in that event. BYU golf, they've got some incredible talent in that program right now. You've seen guys like Zach Blair, Patrick Fishburne, who have made their way to the PGA Tour. I think Peter Kest is well on his way to being a regular on the PGA Tour as well. Not too distant future. Pay attention to what Bruce Brockbank is building with BYU golf. I know that men's golf may not register for many of you guys, but BYU has multiple guys on this golf team right now that I believe if they continue to play like they have, and I think Cooper Jones is right there, chief among them, they have PGA Tour futures. And BYU could be well represented like they have been for years on the PGA Tour, maybe even a little more flush than typical if things work out. Now, one tournament win does not equal a sustained success. And obviously the good win is a crazy one because they're playing the TPC Harding Park, which hosted the U.S. Open not that long ago. And like I said, they're in fourth place in that tournament. But this BYU men's golf program, pay attention to them. They are playing really, really well. Now, BYU baseball had a tough opening game against Kansas, losing 11-1 in their series opener at not Smithfield. I wanted to say Smithfield for whatever reason, but it's at Miller Park, excuse me. And it was a tough opening round loss, but BYU and the Jayhawks are back at it today. Funny enough, coming into this series, BYU and Kansas were tied 6-6 all time in baseball. Now, obviously, Kansas has a one-game advantage in that. We'll see how the Cougars bounce back today. BYU softball started off their weekend with the win, so congratulations to Gordon Eakin and his squad with that W over Houston. They brought their bats to that, and obviously it's good to see them doing their thing. And then coming up this weekend, as I mentioned, you'll have 2 more games each from both the BYU baseball and BYU softball programs, both of them at home this weekend. So if you want to get out and enjoy that, would encourage you guys to do so. And then also coming up this weekend, it is senior weekend for BYU men's volleyball. They're hosting Concordia University of Irvine at the Smith Fieldhouse tonight and tomorrow night. 7 o'clock starts both nights, and both of them will be on BYU TV. It's the one sport that can still be on BYU TV because they are not members of the Big 12 Conference in men's volleyball, but something to pay attention to if you want to watch it. I love watching men's volleyball. I like watching volleyball, period. But it's a really, really fun product. It's fast-paced, and the action is end-to-end. It feels like quite literally. So pay attention to that as well coming up this weekend. All right, that's what I got for you guys. So coming up Monday, it is April Fool's Day. I will not be playing jokes on you, my friends. We are going to be back. We'll be talking BYU football. The final media availability for BYU spring camp is Saturday, so we'll have a reaction to that. I will have you guys. We'll have it all for you. And then April 1st, yet again, another trick. We kick off our off season really in full bloom as April gets going, and we'll start doing some countdowns. We're going to talk about the 1984 National Championship, which is celebrating its 40th anniversary this year. We've got 100 seasons of BYU football as well. We got plenty to count down in the days, weeks, and months ahead as we lead you up to BYU football in 2024. So stick with us and appreciate all of your support of the podcast as always. Thank you for making it your first listen today, and thank you once again to all of you who are everydayers as well, right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.